Nikita, thank you so much for being with me today. It is such a pleasure to share your voice, hear your story, and my hope is continue to have people be inspired by your journey and what you have ignited for yourself. So I'd love for you to take a moment and introduce yourself to us.
Yeah, I am Nikita Williams, and I am a clarity and confidence coach for creatives living with chronic illness. And I love what I do. And I'm
Mm.
a podcast host, so I'm speaking and coaching all of the time.
Mhm.
Hence, Brienne, had to come into my world.
Absolutely. That is one of the main reasons I think people start to percolate on this idea of what do I use my voice for? How much do I use my voice? And what is that actually looking like? One of
Mhm.
the things that I got to thinking about, because we have known each other for a while, which is so delightful, is acknowledging the first thing that really stood out to me about your proactive nature with your history of chronic illness, empowering women in that capacity to still show up for themselves.
Mhm.
You took that proactive step. And I want to share one of the such kind things that you said early on. This was back in February. And you said, "You are on my dream board." And I was so touched. And then, not only that, because you are a woman who walks her walk and walks her talk, you made it happen for yourself. Mere months later, we started
Mhm.
working together in August. And I think that right there showcases the power of intention and the power of awareness and prioritizing something that became important to you. So I'd love for us to start there and
Yeah.
share a bit about what that meant for you at the time to recognize something that you wanted to work on in your voice and kind of how that unfolded to then the decision to start working together.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to think when we connected.
Mm.
I think it was maybe because of the advance. We were together somehow
Yes.
connected through that,
Yes, that sounds correct. Yes.
and I had never I obviously had heard of, voice coaches,
Mhm.
but never and it never dawned on me that, that would be something I would need to do other than, going to the doctor's office and,
Mm.
doing
Mhm.
my throat hurts, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And I remember talking to you or being in a room and you were like, "Yeah, you guys are like vocal warriors." And I was like, wait a minute. What does she mean by that?" And I was like, and then you start describing what that is. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's totally me.
Mm.
Beyond my business, I have my business, I have my clients, I have my podcast, but in my personal life, I spend time in my ministry. So I'm
Mhm.
literally talking all of the time. And it just didn't dawn on me. Oh, you should probably that's another intentional thing you need to be doing for your body as well. And I was like, "Oh,
Mm.
yeah." And so I think you did like a group thing and I was like, "Oh, I love that." And I learned so much. I'm very much about learning. I personally feel like the body is just there to it is a temple, but it's also a thing to communicate with you of what are you really feeling? What is needing to be protected? What needs to be let
Mhm.
go? And all of that stuff. That's just something I've learned in my own journey of
Mm.
living with chronic illness. And so when I did that with you, I was like, oh, snap. I gotta have Brienne in my world. I was like, I gotta have Brienne in my world. Okay, this is not in my budget of anything that I thought about, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so this is different, and I was telling my husband when we were talking about it, he's like, that sounds really cool. And it
Mm.
actually came around a great time where I had just found out I had Hashimoto's, which has a
Mm.
lot to do with the thyroid. And that has a lot to do with this beautiful instrument that we have. And I had it was just perfect timing.
Yeah.
Also being like, oh yeah, totally need to do something with Brienne. It needs to be on the dream board. And I felt that it was you that would help me more than going anywhere else. And
Hmm.
just empowered me to have different tools, which, of course I think we're going to talk about, but it was like, this is a no-brainer.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. I love that. That's something that honestly took you from didn't know it existed to, wow, this is definitely something that I resonate with, especially as not only a vocal athlete, but then being so open-minded, Nikita, like your willingness. And we can jump right into that. Your willingness to do the weird things I would ask you to do sometimes. It was glorious, and this is the kind of fun that we
Mm,
had with it, right? And that's the thing I think that surprises people too. So can you speak to that a little bit and what maybe stretched you outside your comfort zone a little bit?
I pulled a muscle doing some vocal work, y'all, on my leg. So let me tell you, like, it was like, "What are we doing? Like, this is not what I imagined." Like, at the time I started working Brianna, it was also a time I started doing Pilates again in person. So I was
Mhm.
really afraid for my body with Pilates, thinking I'm gonna do like some weird things. And then one day I'm on the floor on all fours doing some humming and vocalizing and reading out loud. And I'm like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, I have pulled a cramp in my leg. Like, this is not what I expected.
So
But
disclaimer, Pilates and voice work on the same day, maybe not.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly, exactly. But it was definitely the things that I learned. I was just telling my husband, he was telling me recently, he's like, "Man, I when we're at our congregation meetings, he's like, I just feel your voice more. It's just more present." And I was telling him, I was like, "Yeah, but Brienne taught me I have so many different kinds of voices. Like, I didn't know I had all these different kind of voices or the way I can go into like this voice or that voice." And the different things we learned through trying those weird things. I
Mhm.
mean I'm down, like, as long I'm down as long as I'm good, and I was like, "Okay, this is different but it
Yeah.
definitely helped me be more in touch with I really do feel it more as an instrument now, like, I never thought I knew it was an instrument, but I don't think I felt it like an instrument, my voice, like, the whole body experience, and because
Mhm.
of the work that we've done, that has been, like, something I can consistently think about, like, "Okay, the reason why my voice is feeling off today is because I didn't warm it up or I didn't, cool it down. I didn't, um, maybe I spoke more than I needed to. Maybe I need to rest more. Um,
Mhm.
just the different things. And also, like, am I using my breath? To me, that's been a very powerful
Mhm.
piece of the voice work was like learning, like, my breath will support me.
Mhm.
um, One of my favorite things to do is, like, the bubble work with the straws, like,
Yeah.
it it brings me back to being a kid. I think that's
Yeah.
honestly some part of it is just bringing, like removing, like, the stress of, like, being something. Because when you are speaking often, you especially as women, you're like, need to look a certain way, or you feel like you need to do all of those things, and as far as working with you, I've definitely, my brow little moments of, like, "Am I overthinking this?" "You're definitely overthinking this."
Yeah.
Like, those different kind of things definitely I'm open to learning, and that's definitely what has happened, and it's only empowered me.
That is so cool, and I what came to mind as you were saying that, I'm recalling too, one of the things that you like you said, you've heard of voice coaches, let's say, and while I personally think labels are a little bit tricky because English doesn't have necessarily all the depth that we would want to describe things, you also enjoy and love singing. And
Yes.
this is something I think that people understandably kind of get the 2 kind of confused in their mind. 2 things, either, "Well, I'm not a singer." It's
Mm,
okay. That's not the point of this is speaking voice, and even deeper than that, you feeling like you are sharing from your heart in the way that is you, but you also happen to love singing around the house and love singing in your
mhm,
ministry. And with that, what did you find was then maybe a belief shift or a myth busting for yourself as it related to, okay, I don't have to give up anything that I love doing with my voice, but
mm,
I do recognize that my speaking voice is working it itself out and running
mhm.
that marathon much more. Can you kind of speak to that a little bit?
Mm, let me think about that for a second.
Mhm.
I think for me, I I think I shared this with you, like, singing never hurt my voice. Like, I
Mhm.
would just
Exactly.
naturally do it, and I
Yeah.
never felt like I had trouble singing.
Right.
Like, it's just but when I would speak it, were there were times where it just really hurtful. Like you'd be like, I'm forcing it or I'm like pushing through.
Yeah.
And I think the work that we did together, I definitely just learned, well, it's because I wasn't using my voice as if I were singing, which is part of that process. I think that's
Mhm.
happened with the voice work, which is like when I was singing, I was more not in my head, right? I was more free feeling and it was just happening as I'm fa la la in my, my singing moment. And so learning like my voice could do the same thing and really feeling empowered in that system really was enlightening because it's not something I had ever thought about.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, people think of them as 2 different
Right.
compartmentalized aspects, when in
Mhm.
actuality, they're 2 branches of the same tree,
Mhm.
and you can weave in, and that's kind of the way we had talked about it, like your conditioning of your voice weaves in a lot of different strengths that you already possess, and
Mhm.
it's just a matter of bringing them into that space in the warm-ups, in the cool downs, in the way you delegate through your day, in having you are one of the handful who I am so grateful having a supportive
Mm.
person in your life, in this case, your partner, who is on board with this. And that's not
Mm.
the case for everybody. Some people still kind of keep their voices in the dark, as it were, don't practice in front of their partners or family, are worried what they might say. But that's again up, like you described, up in the mind about
Mhm.
of dropping into what is serving you and how can your voice showcase that. So that's really awesome. When
Mm.
we think of it, kind of shifting gears a little bit to the just kind of the structure of the way we have started working together. So you were a participant in the Vibrant Voice VIP day. How how did you find that? What were some pros about that? It's intensive. It's intensive in its own right. What were some pros? What were some things that you found worked for your style of learning?
I mean, I consider myself as a creative person, so it's
Mhm.
very visual and just hands-on,
Mm,
also educational. I personally enjoy, like, understanding the why behind doing something, like, that's just that's my personality, and, like, you can't just tell me to do something, and I'm gonna be like, "Yeah, great, let's do that." I need to know, "Why am I doing this?"
mhm. Yep,
And
that
I
makes
think
sense.
from the VIP day, we definitely explored the why, what are the things, like,
Mhm.
what is the making up of the voice
Yeah.
and how to use it, and it is a lot, like, it isn't like it's not like we don't know. We don't know. We think we know, but we don't know because when you get in the VIP day, you're like, "Oh, I totally didn't know that." I didn't know that either, and I think that was really cool because once you do know,
Mm,
you feel so much more like, "Oh, it's not in your head. You're not like." I used to kinda beat myself up about, like, "Man, what am I doing to my voice right now?" Like, I don't know
mhm.
what's happening, and just having the awareness and the education about how the voice looks, how does it sound, what are the vocal cords, like, how you're using your breath from full diaphragm all the way up, like, all of those
Mm.
different things, like, what does that even mean? We've heard those words before, but
Exactly. What does it mean? What does it mean for you
yeah,
versus
exactly.
anybody else? Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a lot of
Mm,
information, but it felt I don't know, Brian, you could probably write a whole book about it and sound like, "Oh, that's so easy," because it's just I mean, that's what you do. So, it
yeah.
felt like a lot of information, but it didn't feel, like, overwhelming. It felt very
Mhm.
easy to understand, and what I really loved about it is that you would always check in. You'd be like, "So how does this make sense? Do I need to re-explain
Mhm.
it? Like, how does this work for you when you're hearing how this works?" So, it definitely felt, um I don't know what the word is. It felt enlightening at the same time as being very practically
Okay.
defined for me, I guess.
Great. Yeah. Not just a information overload and then bye.
Yeah, yeah,
That
right, like, "Okay, she just told me a whole bunch of stuff, and I
Yeah.
don't know what to do with that, but great." Like and I like too how we explored the tools of
Mhm.
the different things, like, "Hey, we're just gonna try this and see how it lands."
Yeah.
And it might not be for you, and that's okay, and we could, like, pull back or do this or do that, and I felt like, to me, that's really important, because I just from my background and who I work with, we don't like the feeling of just being in a box.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's definitely not a feeling I ever experienced with you. So it was very enlightening and practical.
That's wonderful, especially then with the ebbs and flows of how you're physically feeling
Mhm,
on that day. And making that both a part of how you're going to implement the practical side, but also how the voice can be replenishing in its own
mhm,
way. And not another thing to do, rather a way of being with it.
mhm.
That sounds like it brought you relief in different
Yeah.
capacities. Yeah, that's wonderful. The kind of final thing that really stuck out to me is at one point, not only did you feel like you grew in the awareness of your voice, but you said, and I quote, "I think this is me sharing what's on my heart without a filter. And that's a big thing because of this work." And that was in relation to, I believe you're at a ministry meeting, a place that you already feel comfortable.
Mhm.
That's your community. And so can you say a little bit more about that and what that means for you going forward, how this work, what you hope to continue to expand in your voice going forward?
Before you, like, just don't know, like, you just don't know, like, you I don't know how to explain it other than you just don't know what to do, you
Mm,
know, from a background of constantly dealing with, like, the Western medicine in the sense of, like, how to fix something versus how to be proactive in something,
mhm.
and also identifying what is working well and what's not working well with your
Yeah.
voice. I think that's definitely that something had happened. You The empowerment of that just makes it easier for your voice to be free. So, and I think the reason why I brought that up was like I didn't even know it was there because my husband was like, "Hey, I heard your voice." Like we were singing, he's like, "I heard your voice. Like I felt that." Like he was like, "I felt that." And we're in a room full of other people. So for
Yeah.
him to pick that out of the room was like, "Huh, okay, all right." And like knowing, like, even in my podcast work or even working with clients, I can pull from the different voice places of
Yeah.
air and things like that, that I didn't know I had the control of before,
Yeah.
and that alone is like, "Oh, snap." I
Yeah.
I can have control over this, and I know how to protect it and
Yeah.
cherish it at the same time, and so I definitely think going forward for me, it's definitely like I know where I need to go.
Mhm.
I know how I need to might pull back or let it be more open, those
Yeah.
different kind of things. It's just like it's empowerment and being able to speak your mind, speak your
Yeah.
voice at the same time of as feeling not in pain while doing
Exactly. It
it.
resonates through your body in a comfortable way,
Yeah.
both physically and figuratively, so that you're like, "Cool, this is me. This feels amazing when I speak, when I use this." That's wonderful. Oh my gosh. Thank you for delving into that a little bit more. And all I picked when you share that about you and your husband noticing that, all I picture is just this beautiful, like, ripple wave off of you. And that's palpable. That's so palpable, Nikita, and you already show up with your whole self. So how amazing that now this continued alignment and conscious choosing is allowing you to do that even more in the way that is meant to be. So that's
Mhm.
really beautiful. Awesome. Any other closing thoughts, observations, anecdotes, etc.?
I don't know. I think even doing the weird things I just wanted to say, if you're like, oh my gosh, what is Brienne gonna have me doing? Like, what is she doing? It never felt uncomfortable. I always felt like I was
Mm,
in it with like you were with me, even though we were
mhm.
doing this virtually. I always felt like you were with me. It wasn't like I'm sitting here watching you do this thing that I told you to do. And like that to me was really important, having that supportive, like, yeah, this might be awkward. And as adults, I think we definitely have a challenge of tapping into letting some of that stuff go and not being so conscious of what we look like. And I
Yeah.
never felt uncomfortable looking whatever kind of way I looked or
Yeah.
felt with Brienne. And so I think that's really important. And I never felt forced. into using a tool if it just wasn't for me. And I think that was really important, and part of the experience for me.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, it's been so fun, and I am so looking forward to what's ahead, and it's just a joy to see your face and to do all the things with you as well. I also want to make sure that, and you mentioned it just briefly at the beginning, you are a host of a wonderful podcast, and I see that a very special number of episodes has just recently come out, the 100th episode. Congratulations. Yay.
Thank you. Yeah.
So that will be it's called, for everyone listening, it's called She's Crafted to Thrive. It's she has such a variety of people, and again, you hear your voice come through so uniquely even now compared to some of those early episodes before we even started. And some of that was the fatigue and the tiredness and the things that felt off to you. And now that is just so cool to see transform. So check her podcast out. You will see the link connected to this information, and I just highly recommend it for anyone looking to have that fresh perspective on what is a new way to think about wellness, even in the midst of something seemingly unknown and unfamiliar,
Mhm.
or chronic, or just a new way of being and showing up. So thank you, Nikita. I
Thank
appreciate you.
you. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. I wish you a beautiful rest of your day, and thank you all for tuning in. And until next time, bye.